Let me tell you about the Sleep With Me podcast. If you struggle to get a good night's sleep like me, I need you to check out this podcast. Each episode is crafted to help you unwind, featuring gentle storytelling designed to ease your mind and guide you into restful slumber. I kid you not, whenever I'm anxious in bed at night, I turn it on, and before I know it, it's morning, and I'm as refreshed as I've ever been. I am not sure how it works, but trust me when I tell you, it does. So, join me and thousands of others who have turned restless nights into peaceful sleep with the help of the Sleep With Me podcast. Go Global is a free-flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Go Global reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people, welcome back to another episode on the Make Mental podcast. As always, I'm Caleb Munsky, and I am joined by a phenomenal guest. Today we have Liv Nay, who played softball for her sport and her career. It did not go how you would expect a typical college athletics softball journey to go, which is why she is going to make one heck of a guest. So Liv, thank you so much for being vulnerable with us today and willing to share your story.
Yes, thank you so much, Caleb, for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and I always say it's kind of interesting to see how people meet each other and get connected. And we met through kind of a mutual connection here, Jonathan, over at Stories by Student Athletes. So if you haven't checked out his podcast, I always love providing other resources because sometimes Make Mental's just not for you, and that's okay. There's plenty of other places where you can get the help and love you deserve. So we'll send you to Jonathan for this one, and he does a similar thing, and that's where we found Liv, and her story kind of spoke to me and spoke to some of my friends, maybe not to me essentially in my experience, but I definitely had a lot of friends who went through similar scenarios that Liv did. So I wanted to have her on to let my friends know that they are heard and seen. And if you can take something away from it as well, that is fantastic. But I won't keep the floor from Liv too much longer. If you want to just introduce yourself, maybe give us your elevator pitch. Who are you? Where you're from? Maybe tell us about your dogs, anything fun.
Yeah, so I was originally born and raised in a small rural town in Prince George County, Virginia. When I was 16, my whole entire family, including my 3 dogs and 3 cats, packed up our whole lives and we moved down to the loveliest village on the plains in Auburn. And it's been great ever since. I'm a senior at Auburn University, which is crazy how fast time has flown. And yeah, I'm alive, I'm breathing.
Yeah, senior. Wow. I mean, it wasn't too long ago for me, but it feels like such a long time ago at the same time. Are you currently playing sports at Auburn? Have you stepped away from sports? Maybe we can start to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, whenever I went to play in college, I actually graduated early from my high school. I graduated early from Auburn High and moved to Birmingham. I went to UAB and I moved to Birmingham that January and only lasted 1 semester, if that just shows. But yeah.
When you say only lasted 1 semester, do you mean on the softball program or at UAB as a whole?
On the softball program, I loved UAB, the school itself. If I wasn't such a diehard Auburn fan, I probably would still be there. But just because my whole family, Auburn fans, my dad, he went to Auburn for undergrad and veterinary school. My mom, whenever we moved here, went to Auburn to get her MBA. And both of my grandparents both went to Auburn for vet school. And so I kind of ended the line of veterinarians in my family, but I'm still graduating from Auburn.
Yeah, what did you choose to do? What was the switch for you, and what's your degree been like? What's that for you?
Yeah, so I mean, my whole life I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then that kind of switched in high school. I wanted to do something within sports, even though I'm no longer playing sports. I still wanted to be connected somehow, and so I last year I was an intern for the athletics department at Auburn until I started coming home at 1 a.m. way too many times, which I'm a grandma. I have a really early bedtime. And so I was just trying to really look for like a career that, I can come home at a reasonable hour. So I'm now in marketing, and that's how I got connected with Start a Conversation. Started doing marketing for them, and Ward Smith, who is great, had a creative brief with me back in like late May, and started talking about like student athlete mental health week and what we're going to do to prepare for October 5th. And I was just thinking like, dang, where was this 2 years ago when desperately needed like someone to talk to as a student athlete going through mental health issues. And after that meeting, I immediately get an email from Ward, and he was like, it seems like you have a story that you need to share, and I feel like everyone should hear your story. And so this is kind of like how this whole thing has gotten brought up, how I met with Jonathan and now you. And so it's really all coming full circle.
Yeah, the more and more I dive into the mental health world, but the sports world in whole, Auburn has some giant spider web out in the universe where people just are connected with each other. And I don't think I've met a stubborn one, a selfish one, a bad egg yet from Auburn. I mean, we've had Morgan Lee, we've had started conversation with Malcolm, we had a track athlete, and I really feel bad. Justin Stuckey, how could I forget? He's all over the communication side of athletics right now. I'm so glad I remember that because I would kick myself in the butt. But the point being, Auburn has been more than helpful to our success over here at Make Mental, and Start a Conversation is very new to that for us. But again, we're so excited to continue to grow with them. That, for our listeners who don't know, was a little mini pilot of marketing that we did with them just recently for Student Athlete Week. You might have seen me with some reels in there, some posts. If you looked hard enough, you would have seen Liv in some of the advertising herself, actually wearing a hoodie. I think that might be inspired by her, but we won't steal all the glory. So yeah, check out them as well. But when you said you sat down and you met with Ward, that jumpstart, that for initial conversation, was mental health for you something that was a little shameful, or was it something that you were on the cusp of like, hey, I'm okay with mental health, like not in the sense of like where you were at, like stability wise, but in terms of being okay to talk about it, wanting to talk about it, feeling the need to? Or was it Ward who really was like, look, it's okay to talk about it. Here's the opportunity if you want.
Yeah, when I had talked about it before, I wouldn't give like the full story. I told Ward like during that creative meeting, like, I'm not going to bore you with the story because we'd be here for the next 35 minutes, and I'm sure you got better things to do. Like whenever I would tell my story, it would just be like my the only people in my life that knew my full story were my parents, because when I was going through that tough time as a student athlete, I kind of felt like all I had was my parents. And really my mom. My dad was a crazy softball dad. He still is. And he was like my pusher, he was my motivator. And then when I needed like to crumble, when I needed to like, you know, my alpha my alpha type, I would go to my mom, and she'd just be like a shoulder for me to, you know, vent or cry on. And so it was really my parents that knew the full story. And when Ward presented the idea of me telling my story, let alone creating a hoodie about my story to bring awareness, it was kind of like, well, I mean, I haven't really talked about it before. It's been 2 years, and I'm telling this story now from like a much more healed place in my life. Who I was well over 2 years ago is a completely different person sitting here today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to point out that you said when you were mentioning your story to Ward, it was just like, oh, like you'll be bored, or you kind of downplayed the significance and the weight that it held in your life, which does have its benefits depending on what stage of your mental health journey you're in. But I would argue it's better out than in. It's better to talk to someone, even if it is your parent, if it is a trusted mentor, if it's a friend, if it's yourself, right? Write it down in a journal. Just get it out into the universe. So that way, 2 years down the road, you can maybe not look back on it fondly, but you can say, hey, look what I got through. Look what I've accomplished. Look how far I've come. Or hey, maybe I'm still here and that's okay, but I can recognize that. How can I get out of it? So we are proud of you for having a different perspective on it now, 2 years later. That probably sounds crazy in itself to say 2 years later as a senior. Before we jump into the nitty gritty and the actual story of yourself, why do you think it took 2 years for you personally to be okay with sharing the full story? Because I know personally, I still haven't even shared my full story, and I've immersed myself into this world fully. And honestly, I never will share my full story because there's pieces of it that I would like to keep personal and to those who it involves, or to those who I choose to tell, in a world where we say, hey, share this. We say, repost that, like this, you can do this, where we're presented with so many options. Sometimes the intimacy of keeping details to ourselves is actually beneficial and attractive. But for you, why choose to share most, if not all, of your story now after keeping it to yourself for so long?
Yeah, the minute I really left Birmingham, I thought that it would just be like an immediate relief that I got myself out of a toxic environment and I really like stood my ground and did what was best for me for once, because I'm very much a people pleaser and always, doing what other people are doing. But that one time I did something that was best for me. And I think for years, I would have people ask me, like, why'd you quit? Like, why'd you stop playing? Like, you made it to the top level. Like, why'd you stop there? And quite frankly, I just didn't really know what to tell them, because, one, if I'm going to tell my story, you need to know beginning, plot, end, or else people are going to come across as saying, like, she's complaining, she's weak, which is not the truth at all. And so when we really talk about like mental health and student athletes, it needs to be talked about more. And so it took those 2 years to really process that, because quite frankly, I felt ashamed and I felt like in that situation, I felt really unwanted. And I just didn't want to, I guess, face the music of, wow, I'm no longer playing softball and I don't really feel like talking about it, so don't ask. And it was just a lot at once. And coming from a more healed place, and before I did have that conversation with Ward, I knew that if I was going to tell my story, it had to be for an appropriate time. And when I got presented about Student Athlete Mental Health Week, and when Ward was like, everyone needs to hear your story, I figured, like, okay, well, I feel like I could do this. I feel like I could do this in a much more healed place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I just want to make note of the words that you use, the shame, the feeling of unwantedness, the maybe underlying disappointment that you thought some of your friends or close family would have, that you did make it to such a high level and then chose to stop. You said it sounded like you were complaining, right? And those are all others' opinions, people who weren't there necessarily, people who aren't you. And I think there is no timetable on when you should or could share. Again, it takes everyone a different timetable. There's no right or wrong answers. It's not a test. And I think that's something that athletes fail to realize too. Like, you're not wrong for sharing. You're not wrong for not sharing. You're not wrong for quitting. You're not wrong for playing. And again, I'll reshape that word quitting for stepping away, because for some people, quit holds such a strong connotation for taking the healthy break that you deserve, even if it's indefinite. I guess that's a lighter way to say that. But now that you kind of had that shield up for 2 years, that deflection, if you will. Now that we've broken through it, now that you've chose to set that shield down, what's it been like for you? Has there been relief? Has there been a whole whirlwind of emotions? Can you describe that process?
Yeah, it definitely has been like a huge like thing off of my shoulders, and for 2 years I've kind of just put that experience in the back of my mind. I didn't allow myself to think about it, and just trying to protect my mental health by doing that, even though I am in a good place. But sorry, what was the question again?
No, you're okay. I said now that you've been able to like set that shield down and let other people in on your story, what has that been like for you? Has there been positive feedback, negative feedback, both personally and from the outside world?
Absolutely. It's been nothing but like positive, and I've had friends and family reach out to me and be like, I didn't know you went through that. Like, I didn't know it was that bad. And it was just something that kept very far back in my mind and didn't speak about it until now. But like what I'm trying to do with me telling my story is to really be an advocate for student athletes all over the world who are going through something similar or the same of something that I went through, and basically just to tell them that you're not alone.
Yeah, build a community of healers, and just inspire the next generation of what seems to be softball athletes for you, but athletes in general. I think now is the appropriate time, though, to kind of dive into your story, maybe get into some of the details. So, again, if this would trigger anything for anyone, please skip ahead a couple minutes at a time until we are at the end of Liv's story. I will summarize it in the show notes for you so you can still understand what she's talking about afterwards. But the point of this is to help. And if the time is not right for you to hear this, please skip to later in the episode. So, Liv, with that out of the way, please enlighten us with your experience.
Okay, first, I guess part of the story, kind of a time where it was really confusing for everyone, and that was during like the beginning in the midst of the pandemic. And it was hard on everyone and it was different on everyone. For me as an athlete, that was really hard because coaches weren't allowed to come watch us play at showcase tournaments. They weren't throwing on camps, and it was a tough situation for someone who was a junior in high school and finally allowed to talk to college coaches. Because of the NCAA and with COVID, the NCAA came out with 2 extra years of didn't get to finish their 2020 year, and another one, um, if they want to go get their masters and still play, they can. And so during this time, a lot of coaches weren't giving out scholarships. They weren't talking to players about, hey, would you like to play here? And I had 3 offers at the time, and all those offers had evidently dropped because they would have girls come back and use those 2 years of eligibility. And so the rosters were going to be full for the next 2 years, and they weren't really looking for any more players, which 100% understood. It was a hard time, especially them trying to keep a team together, but also added in more talent. My dream school to play at was also Auburn, and it was the same thing with them, and I don't blame the coaches at all. It was a really tough time, but I was also really stressed out because I didn't know where I was going to be playing for the next 4 years. Prior to COVID, my hitting coach, who is Scotty Woodard, who coached with Clint Myers before Mickey Dean came, and these are all Auburn softball coaches, past and present. And after Clint Myers retired, Scotty Woodard came in and became my hitting coach because he was still in the Auburn area. And so he was my hitting coach for probably about a year until he got a head coaching job at UAB that summer of 2020. And it was really weird because UAB was not on my radar. I had no intentions of going to UAB But Scotty and I had that really close player-coach relationship. And so even when he was at UAB and I was still in Auburn, we would still have phone calls every month just to, check up on each other, not just like talking about softball, but just to like ask each other, like, how you're doing, like mentally. And so one day I called Scotty after all of my offers had folded, and I was really upset because I was stressed out about trying to find a place to call home. And after I was done yapping, he was like, all right, well, why don't you come play for me? And I was like, okay. And he was like, are you being serious? Like, are you pulling at my leg or something? And I was like, no, I'm considering it. And he was like, oh, well, okay. Don't make a rash decision right now. Take some time to think about it. Call me back when you're ready. I'll put you on the list, and yeah, just let me know. And I was like, okay. And so after talking like a lot with my family, because like the deciding factor was close to home. And if that was going to be the closest D1 school close to home, then that was going to be it. And so 2 weeks later, I called Scotty back and I was like, okay, I'll play for you. And he was like, as you should. And so I felt an immediately like sense of relief, just kind of like leave my shoulders now that I've finally like set UAB as my home. And it was great. And then kind of fast forwarding, we're in year 2021. This is July of 2021 now. Scotty ended up getting a coaching job at Texas State to go coach with his sister. And so, which I completely understood that. I understand him wanting to be close to family. And I'm trying to find the nicest way possible to say this, but I don't think there is. I got left with the head coach. I think that was the easiest and nicest way to put it. But and before, getting to UAB, because I did end up graduating early from my high school in December 2021 and decided that I wanted to start practicing for the team January 2022, and which I was 100% allowed to do that. And so before I moved to Birmingham in January, I was on the phone with the coach a lot, and he was great over the phone. He was a great person at our official visit, and just a really pleasant guy to talk to. When I eventually got to UAB, things were a little different coach than what I talked to on the phone. The day leading up to me moving out, my mom got COVID, and so it already had started out off on the wrong foot. Because your mom's supposed to help you move into your first college dorm. They had to like make sure things are clean and organized and make sure you didn't forget anything. And I didn't have that. And so I already felt like things were very off. And God bless my dad. He tried his best. But so also during this time, like I also was not feeling that great, but I just kept pushing. I wasn't allowing myself to get COVID just because I was locked in and I was ready to start practicing. And then the next day, we had our first day of Hell Week, which is like 5 days in a row of waking up at 7 a.m., not getting off of the field until 6 o'clock at night. And so I was mentally preparing myself for that. And also during this time, I was out of shape because 5 months prior, I'd broken my pinky and was out for 5 months. And so I knew that this was going to be like a getting back into the literal swing of things and getting back in shape and, just getting used to being part of a team dynamic again. And so I knew that we had a run test that morning, and I knew that it was probably going to be tough because I was a little bit out of shape, but I told myself that I could do it. I've never had my body shut down on me like that. And this is me trying to extend my legs while I have COVID-19. And so that probably wasn't a great, healthy thing to do when you're trying to run as hard as you can, but you feel like you're about to pass out. I ended up getting through the rest of the day with a pounding headache. Later that night, we got on a Zoom call because during practice that day, we had probably about 8 or 9 girls go out because of COVID. And so we all had to get tested that morning or that next morning. And so we all go get tested the next morning, and then lo and behold, later that night found out that I had COVID. And so looking back, that was just God's way of saying, okay, you can hug your mom goodbye. Because we had to stand 6 feet apart and both of us were crying because we couldn't like tell each other goodbye. And my mom and I are like best friends. And so that was a rough one for sure. Ended up going back to Auburn for quarantine. And during that time, being in quarantine, we had Zoom calls and going over different situations and plays on Zoom calls. And it wasn't very productive because I'm very much a hands-on learner. Like, you have to show me how to do it physically, not through visual screen. And so after 2 weeks of being in quarantine, I came back to Birmingham and I had to get tested again, make sure I still didn't have it. The trainer there was like, "What were your symptoms?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I just had some tight chest pain, but nothing too big." They ended up performing an EKG on me and found out that I had a heart murmur, which was really scary for me because I've never dealt with any issues with any of my organs. And so that was definitely something that definitely was the root cause for a lot of anxiety for me. And so the next day I went to the UAB hospital and they did an echo on me and they were like, "Well, you definitely have one, but we're just going to keep an eye on it. Don't do anything that will stress you out." And I'm like, well, this whole experience has been stressing me out already. And so after I was cleared to play, it was just basically understanding the ways of UAB softball and trying to figure out how they play. And my goal was just to blend. I just wanted to be part of everything. I just want to blend. And for like the first month and a half, well, about first month, it was just me learning. And then that second weekend in February was when games were about to start. Since I was a red shirt and I came in early, I wasn't allowed to play that semester. And so I was just there and I was watching, still learning. I was a role player. I was, asking the girls if they needed water. And this is them not telling me to do anything. I was like, "Hey, you good? You need water? Hey, that was a great play." Just like basically being a cheerleader and trying to blend. After that, for those next 2 weeks, things were like really good. You are your biggest critic, and I felt personally I was understanding, I was executing plays, and I was finally getting it. And then the day before a series, we all had a terrible practice. Terrible. It was terrible practice for me. And it was so bad that coach was like, "You know what, that's it. Y'all just go home." He ended the practice early. That's how bad it was. And so that next day, which was the beginning of the series, and I had class that morning. After class, I got a text from my coach and was like, "Hey, come in my office for a little bit." And I was like, "Okay." And I figured it would just be something like a checkup, like, "Hey, how are you doing? Like, you did great improving on these things. Do this next time to improve." Constructive criticism. And that's what I was thinking I was getting. I went to his office and one of my teammates was there with me and she ended up going in before me, and 5 minutes later she came out crying. And I was like, I don't think this is gonna go the way I was thinking it would go. And turns out I was right. I went into that meeting and the coach basically said, like, "You don't fit in with this team. You're not getting better. You're getting worse. And because of that, you're not allowed to dress out with us this weekend and you're not allowed in the dugout." And I was like, okay. And I'm saying this while trying so hard not to cry because when you feel like you're giving everything you got and you get told it's all for nothing, it's kind of like your confidence goes from here to here. And I called my dad and told him what happened. And he was like, "No, you're coming home right now. You're not going to sit in that dorm room all weekend and not be with the team." And the girls on the team were also kind of confused because you just don't split up two teammates from a team, you know? So I ended up going home that weekend and I walked in the door like right when the game started. I didn't even tell my mom I was coming home. And she looked at me when I came in through the door. She looked at her watch and she was like, "What are you doing here?" And I had to explain to her what happened. And she was like, oh no, I don't like that at all. And I think that was like my parents' first red flag about that situation. And so after that, I went back to Birmingham, and during this time, still proving myself to this coach. I don't care what it takes. I am going to prove myself if it's the last thing I do. And so I'm doing extra work 30 minutes or before or after practice. I'm doing extra work on our day off, and I'm trying my absolute hardest. During this time, this is really the time when things start to go really downhill for me. Whenever I would be in situations and I made one mistake, it got to a point to where coach would kick me out of practice. And he would scream at the top of his lungs, "Get out! You're going to kill somebody," or "You're doing it wrong," or something off like that. Instead of like, "Hey, instead of doing that, do this next time." And so the first time I got kicked out of practice, I was just really like trying to keep it together, trying to see what I did wrong. The second time I got kicked out of practice, it was all for like mistakes, like small ones, because at this point, my anxiety is getting to a point to where my body takes over. That muscle memory that I've had for the past 11 years, like a routine ground ball crow hop into the infield. Like, I've made that play hundreds and thousands of times. Can't do that anymore because my body, like, I get so terrified to move from the outfield that I can't make a routine play. And whenever a ball gets hit to me, my whole body starts shaking because, one, I don't want to get kicked out of practice. And two, I'm terrified of making a mistake, but I can't move. And so I end up making a mistake and then I get kicked out of practice. That last time I got kicked out of practice, I was over it. I grabbed my stuff and I left. And I don't think the coach ever noticed. And so also during this time, whenever I would still do extra work with the coaches, my whole body would start shaking because I was genuinely terrified of this man at this point, because all I'm trying to do is prove myself to him. And it's still not working. And I would have to like make up a lie and tell myself like, oh, like my legs are sore from weights this morning, to why my whole body was shaking. And then he would come around and say, it's because you're out of shape. He would say, because you're out of shape, Nay. And so I would be like, okay. Also during this time, I basically cut myself off from my teammates because I felt like all I had was me in this situation. And of course I would call my parents to tell them what things were and how things were doing. I told my mom that, I'm going to give it another year, and if it doesn't change, then I'm done. Because I don't like to be labeled a quitter. I always give everything that I do the benefit of the doubt. And so I wanted to give this situation a chance. And so it was the week before the last series, and at this point before practice, I would have panic attacks, which I've never had a panic attack before. And so I didn't really know how to handle that and how to deal with it. But it would just be like, okay, have a panic attack, go to practice with a smile on my face, expect to get kicked out, and that's it. And a lot of my teammates would be like, you handled that situation better than I did. And I would just tell them it's just another Thursday. It was at a point where I was getting used to this kind of treatment and getting used to the fact that, like, you already know, go ahead, go have your panic attack, go show up to practice with a smile on your face, wipe your tears, tell yourself you're awesome, and then expect to get kicked out. And so that week, the last week of series before playoffs, still doing extra work with these coaches. I'm giving it all I have left at this point, even though I'm mentally drained and really just hurt and numb at this point. I go in, I do some cuts with coach, and I'm about to leave and go to class, and I said, okay, thank you, coach. He called me back and was like, hey, come back here. And so I walked back over to him, and he said, do you want to play here? And I was like, yes, sir. He said, do you want to play more than the average role player? And I was like, yes, sir. And then he said, well, I don't think you're ever going to play here. You haven't gotten better. You're just gotten worse. And I kind of blame Scotty for allowing you to come here. So we need to talk about different schools. And at first, all that like little sparkle of hope that I had just kind of demolished itself. And at that, like right when he said that, I was thinking like, I just gave this 5 months of everything that I mentally, physically, and emotionally had left for this man. And it didn't work out. And so I felt so defeated at this point and so unwanted. But then after that conversation, I walked back to my vehicle. I told myself, I was now thinking, oh my gosh, this is my way out while the door's open. And so I called my mom and I told her what happened. And I was like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm just done. And she said, it's time for you to come home. Like, in the most, like, it's okay. It's okay, Liv. You can come home. And so when she said that, all of that numbness, that pain, that insecurity just like instantly left my body because I wasn't going to come home if my parents didn't want me to, because they're my biggest influence in my life still. And so even my dad was like, it's okay, darling. You can come home. I loved it as much as you loved it. And so just hearing them say, like, we know you gave it your all, everything that you had left. We don't want you to be miserable. We care about your mental health here, even though this coach didn't. We want what's best for you. And the best thing for you to do now is to think about what you want to do. And I told them, I think what I want to do is to come home. I think I'm tired of dealing with this every day. I'm tired of having to put a smile on my face when in reality I just want to crumble. And so that next week I went to the coach's office and I was like, I'm struggling mentally, physically. I think the best thing for me to do is to go home. This whole experience kind of took that love of softball away from me, something that I deeply cherished and loved so much. And I think it's time for me to go. And the exit meeting ended on a good note. And so since to this day, I have not been back to Birmingham. I packed up my car and left Birmingham that same day I had my exit meeting.
Wow. I mean, thank you for sharing that and just getting that out there for all of our listeners to hear. And once again, off your chest, because I know as far away as it can be, sometimes it's not easy to kind of relive those moments. So I really appreciate that. And I know our listeners do as well. When I was listening to your story the first time on Stories by Student Athletes, I was more listening for your story and for the content and like, oh my goodness, like I can't believe this happened. Like I'm a coach myself. So when I started to do some self-evaluation, I'm like, wait a minute, do I inadvertently fall into some of these categories of the way the coach was treating you? Or if I think I do, like, can I confirm with my athletes that is that true? And if it is, I apologize and I'm going to fix it. But thankfully it wasn't true. So thank goodness there, I would have quit my job.
That's
but
good.
For you, now this time I was like, okay, I've heard her story once. What I want to do is figure out some questions that I have and some patterns, not just your story, but that might be true for your entire life. So if it's okay, I would like to maybe point out a few of those patterns. So then knowing that you've gone through these experiences, maybe you can help individuals who are right in that seat right now notice some patterns, notice some warning signs, and then pull on your strength for themselves. Cool. So one pattern I noticed is uncertainty for you, even though you're a very good athlete, right? You were in high school, and like everyone else, COVID threw a wrench in all of our plans, even those of us who are still in college, because now we're like, okay, we got this extra year of eligibility, but do I want to, if you're not on scholarship, do I want to pay to go to grad school just to play my favorite sport in the world for one more year? So that was uncertainty. But for you, it was the opposite, right? You're like, I had some things lined up and then it was gone. And then you had your mentor and Scotty, like a father figure in softball for you, if you will. And then he was there and then he was gone. And then you moved in and then your parents were gone and you got into some sort of routine and all of a sudden the routine was gone. So it was like no matter what you were doing, you couldn't exist in that space for a long enough period of time to build some confidence, to reassure yourself that's where you're supposed to be. It was more of like a, hey, maybe if I stay a little longer, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like the mentality that us athletes have is like, I don't want to be seen as that quitter, so let me stick it out. Maybe it'll change. It's worked out in the past, all those things. For you, obviously now you can sit back and look and say, okay, I should have noticed this, or I wish I could have noticed this. What is the difference for you, and some advice for these younger athletes who may be going through this is, okay, I'm giving my maximum effort, but at what point do I need to show some self respect? At what point am I giving everything that I have, but also hurting myself in the long run?
Yeah, I guess one thing to definitely be aware of whenever a player commits to a college out of high school or goes through the transfer portal is to find a coach that has a coaching style that works for you. Not because they're the best team in Conference USA. Well, now I think they're I don't remember what conference UAB is in now. But, you know, it's really just like if you want to be happy somewhere, yes, you may be happy if you go play for the University of Alabama, but that coaching style may not work for you. And it really just like depends on like who the player coach relationship is and figuring out what the coach's values are and see if your values match and see if that relationship can build. Whenever Scotty left, I kind of felt like I didn't have like a good player coach relationship, and I figured I would have that with the coach at UAB, but it ended up being something totally different. And so definitely have your values intact and understand your coach's values that you want to play at or you are playing at to see if that's a good fit for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the best piece of advice that I heard regarding the coaching situation was much like you send a coach a highlight reel, they're on their best behavior when you come in for visits, when they're on your initial Zoom calls. Like that's whatever you see there, 99% of the time, I'd argue, is best behavior coach, right? When you start losing, when star athletes start getting injured, when the team gets midway through the season and hates each other's guts for about a week, that's when you see your coach's true colors. And again, they're human too, so they're allowed to make mistakes. But if those mistakes get repetitive, if they are extremely detrimental to your physical, mental, spiritual, emotional well-being, that's not that's not okay. Even if it's one mistake, they are still the adult in the situation, right? That's where this gets really tricky because as an athlete, you have to understand the difference between, I think you mentioned constructive criticism and just blatant rudeness. Was there any point in time that it clicked for you? I know you mentioned your parents' first red flag, but what was your first red flag where it might have been like, okay, the way this coach coaches to me just feels so out of pocket. I can't be here anymore.
Yeah, um, gosh, I remember one comment one of the coaches said to me. We were doing some sort of drill, and I must have done it really well because the coach said, "Good job, Liv. You're not going to hear me tell you that often, that often." Kind of like during the time, I was like, yes, finally, I got a compliment. something along those lines. This is great. I'm going to have a great week now that I got a compliment from coach. But now looking back on it, that was such a backhanded compliment. Like, if I had the sense that I have now 2 years ago, I would have been like, what? And so that was the beginning of the red flags, per se.
Yeah, what was this innate need to get a compliment or a positive reaction from your coach? Because I think a lot of athletes know how to play the game, right? Can we adapt to the coaches or the team's needs in order to get a chance to be on the field or in the game? Is that what it was for you, or is there something deeper? I know you mentioned people pleasing is a character trait of yours. I feel you there, but was it deeper for you at the time and now? Was it more than, hey, I just need a compliment for coach, or is it like I desperately need to play softball and it has to be here because I'm already here?
Yeah, I think bottom line, all I wanted was for coach to like, for him to know and for him to see that I'm here for a reason. And so I got to a point, instead of playing softball for myself and for my team and getting better for myself and my team, I was getting better for the sake to satisfy a coach. And on top of all that, like anxiety and panic and worry, that wasn't, healthy. It's not a healthy thing to have to get better for someone else's benefit, even if that person is your mentor. And so that last, when he told me that he doesn't think I'll play here, that was that like really like take a dagger to the heart kind of moment, because I'd spent 5 months getting better for you at this point. Not for me, not for my team, not for everyone around me, for you. And just like that took a lot of mental health work afterwards to basically be like, I don't need someone else's satisfaction. I don't need someone to tell me good job. It's nice to hear someone say good job to you. But if you know that like within yourself, then you can go anywhere. But it took a lot of therapy and like learning that if you don't have that confidence within yourself to tell yourself like, hey, that was great, good job, allow yourself to feel good about that, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just celebrating the small wins, right? Like the fact that at one point you had everything lined up and then shit hit the fan and you had nothing and you were able to climb your way back out, find yourself a school, graduate early, get the approval of your parents, right? The people whose approval matters the most to you. But then also to kind of say, like, hey, it's nice to hear my parents say that I come back home, but I'm ultimately choosing it, right? You started to build that confidence almost immediately, I think, whether you recognize it or not. Obviously, you mentioned it took a lot of work and effort to get to this point in time. If you were to look back now and be able to give yourself a piece of advice just regarding the whole situation, what would it be?
That's a good question. Be your own person, really. Just like I read a quote the other day, like, don't go through life, grow through life. I learned, as bad and awful that situation was, I took so much wisdom and experience from it, was to really just like really protect my peace and protect my mental health more than anything. And I've learned that now it's really hard for someone to bring me down because I've heard it all. And so whenever someone tries to bring me down, I just tell them, keep coming. You're not going to bring me down. You're not going to hurt me, because finally I've learned to protect my peace.
Mm. Yeah, such a shift in perspective and just the whole mindset, really, right? You went from someone bringing you down to then running back to them, needing to to get approval, right? And now it's like, all right, you can say whatever you want. I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing to go. It's my life. I'm going to do what I'd like respectfully, right? It's never just punch them in the face and run, for lack of better terms. It's, hey, we're going to sit down, have a talk, and I appreciate you as a person. I don't like your X, Y, or Z style, whatever it is, coach, boss, whatever. You have to be respectful, and you just dip and you go your separate ways. And if life brings you back to him, it brings you back to him. But if it doesn't, at least you did what was good for you. And I think for us athletes, that is so hard, especially when we're on a team, right? We're taught from a young age, like, it's not about you. There's no I in team. You need to perform for the people next to you. I mean, it's everything but for you, right? And then at the end of the season, we get team and personal accolades. So it's like, wait a minute, I did all this work for the team and now it's about me? Like, that's some of the most uncomfortable moments of a college career. It's a little backwards in that sense. But I think if the athlete can understand getting better for yourself is helping the team. If you can, I don't know, say you're a runner, if you can improve your time by 10 seconds, I mean, that's an absurd amount of time for a runner. I just pulled that out of thin air. But if you can improve your time at all, it gives your team score the best chance to win. Or if you're in a relay, right? If you can improve your lap time by a half a second for yourself because it feels good, because it makes you healthier, because you love the sport and you love the competition and the drive, you're helping your team to begin with, right? If you can't take care of yourself first, you can't take care of anyone else. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you a couple more things, and then we'll jump into the final segment here. Now, having so much time and space, you said grow through what you go through. You're older. I was doing some reading, and the word message really stuck out in my head. I kept seeing it over and over again in this passage of the book I was reading, and it was like 7 steps of effective leadership. I don't know. It was some nerdy book because that's all I read anymore. And they just kept saying message and message and message. And I was like, I think I underlined it like 12 times on the same page. And I was like, wait a minute, can we break that word up? Right? The first half is mess, the second half is age, right? And I think this fits into your scenario perfectly. And there's even a third word in there, which we'll get into, right? Early on, I mean, and you're still so young, but earlier on in your life, it was a little bit of a mess in this area. This dynamic of who do I want to become as a person? Who do I want to become as a softball player? Who do I want to become without a crutch to lean on, without a mentor who brought me here, the coach Scotty, your parents being a little further away from home, leaving your high school friends early, and then even earlier than that, leaving your home with your family, right? It
Yeah.
was, for better, for worse, it was a little bit of a mess.
Yes, it
Then you
was.
get a little bit older, that age part, and you're able to see that mess as clearer. You're able to make sense of it. You gain more wisdom. You gain a perspective. You gain some time away from the situation. I mean, every single cliche word you could throw in there, but it really applies. They're cliche for a reason. You're able to present your message. There's a third word in the word message, and it's sage. Ooh, fancy, right? And that is like, I mean, it's a color, number one, but being colorblind, I don't focus on colors all that often. I was more interested in the other aspect. Sage as a healer, right? It's often been used for calming presence, for healing. I see your mom as sage. I see your mom as the calm in the chaos, and your dad too, but I'll take your own words and spit them right back at you. He tries his best, you know? But I really do. I see your parents as that sage, as that calming presence, no matter what mess you are going through, no matter what age you're at, they're there for you. They're supportive. They're honest. And that's just who they are. As someone who's been blessed with that parent relationship, what has that meant for you? How have they been able to support you now in sharing your message now that you've gone through that mess?
Yeah, they they still, they love softball. They're still so much into softball. But now that like I'm not playing it anymore and just like kind of going through that, they've been like a mentor to like other parents that have softball players and be mindful if your daughter wants to play in college, you have to be mindful of this and you have to be mindful of X, Y, and Z. And they've taken, my story and my experience growing up playing the sport because, they were the ones that took me to lessons. They took me to tournaments. They took me to practice. And it was 11 years of our lives of doing that all the time. And so, I mean, of course, like, they're glad that they just have me and we're able to find new ways of all of us doing something together because softball was our thing. And I had a little brother at home that wasn't really into sports. And so now it's like, as a family, like, we're able to do this and we'll also give advice to those softball players and parents. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're very aware of your scenario and how you've handled it. Your emotional intelligence is very high. You have what seems to be at the moment, I'm not going to say a perfect balance because nothing's perfect, but a healthy balance of perspective, but also that self-respect that we talked about, that I gave maximum effort, but I'm going to protect my peace. Like, we can all look back on things with regret and wish we handled things different ways because hindsight is 2020, but you seem to have at least that piece of your story squared away. Like, hey, this happened. I can either let time be the ultimate healer, or I can choose to take some more time and figure it out. And I think you're doing both perfectly. And like I said, I'm very happy for you that you have your parents there um, as a source of strength, right? They get to celebrate your strength because you're drawing on theirs. And I think that is a beautiful dynamic in itself. That sounds like it was there every step of the way. And I know personally the sacrifice that parents give for their children to go to these sporting events because I have two older brothers who also played sports. So I don't think we had maybe one night a week, maybe Sunday night was free, but even for like an hour, we were at some sports center, we were at some tournament. They made so many financial sacrifices for that I know it would hurt a little bit if one day we just up and said we're not playing anymore. They would question us because it's been our whole life. Like, hey, are you feeling good? Like, are you sure you want to stop? But ultimately, they just said, hey, we want you to be happy. Like, they'd also be like, you're pretty good at this. Like, why are you stopping? But they would understand.
I know for sure that my parents are ready for the next generation and I have to tell
Of
them to wait.
softball players. Yes, fair enough. Fair enough. You got to get that. You got to get a dog in the meantime, and then teach her or him to retrieve bats. We'll practice. Be the bat dog.
I'll stick to being a dog mom for now.
Yes. Well, dogs are amazing, and again, another source of strength. Right, your animals, your pets. I mean, just coming home from work, it's incredible. Like, I've been away for 4 hours, 5 hours at a time, and it's like it's the first time they see me in a year. Right? It's that happy feeling. Can we find that feeling? Actually, this leads me to a different question I want to ask, but can we find that feeling of joy within ourselves, right? I know when I have that bad day at work, I'm like, oh, thank God I have my little dog to come home to. She's going to cheer me up, right? Can we find that within ourselves? Is it going to the gym? Is it reading? Like, what do you like to do when what you're doing or potentially what you like to do isn't working out? For you now, what is that? What do you like to do now that softball is over? What fills your cup? What kind of keeps your reason why going?
Yeah, well, I definitely have been into reading lately, which, I mean, I read when I was little, but now that, like, I'm in a more healed place, like, reading definitely, like, is very, what's the word? Namaste of me.
A little therapeutic.
Yeah, that's the word, very therapeutic.
Are we
Um,
reading fiction? Are we reading nonfiction? What are we reading here?
it's been more fiction lately.
What's the book?
I
What do we need to check out?
It's a book that probably every girl my age has read. Ends with Us series by Colleen Hoover. And I just watched the movie and I told myself I'm reading the book before I watched the movie. And I did. But I'm looking forward to reading more of her books. And also just trying to find every possible way to relax. I That's my goal in life, to be relaxed after playing alpha and being a strong woman all day. I like to just come home, decompress, hang out with my boyfriend, hang out with my family and whenever they're here, hang out with my friends. I started playing pickleball.
I love pickleball. I need
I
to get
started playing
myself a
pickleball.
paddle.
Yeah, and I'm starting up golf here soon. I don't know how that's going to go because
It's
from
fun.
football to
It's fun.
golf, it might not be a huge difference, but the difference is pretty significant.
Yeah, I like picking up hobbies that you're okay with being bad at. Genuinely. I'm not saying you're a bad reader. I'm not saying you're a bad pickleball player. But personally, me for golf, I'm barely a bogey golfer, right? Pay the money to play golf. I'm taking as many swings as possible. That's why I like to tell people. But it's one of those things where I know if I stay consistent at it, I will see improvement, right? That side of me will never go away. You have to embrace the competitive side of you and that it will never go away and find ways to implement it in a relaxing part of your life. Sometimes I play golf for fun. Sometimes I play golf with an objective, like get better at this. And sometimes I play it to win, right? When I play with my brothers, it's to win no matter what. Like that's never going away. That
Oh, yeah.
fills my competition. But that does kind of bring us towards the end of this episode of the Make Mental podcast. Before I enter the final question, big scary final question of the episode, is there some place that if someone connected with you today, you'd feel comfortable with them reaching out to either seek advice or maybe have you direct them to someone who is professionally qualified to give them some help?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether someone's an athlete or not, and they're just genuinely like struggling, I just want them to know that they're not alone. I feel like a lot of us, we struggle mentally, and I feel like a lot of people don't really know where to go because in their mind, they just feel like no one knows what I'm going through. I'm alone in this. I don't know how to change this feeling. I definitely have been an anchor for a few of like my friends that have felt comfortable enough to come to me and be like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. And I'll tell them, like, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I think, that's something that you should definitely like talk to me or talk to like someone professionally about because your mental health is so important as is actually as important as physical health. And so if we could just get like a conversation going about how you're feeling or just like you can say hello to a stranger and start a conversation with them. They could be dealing with something and they don't know who to talk to. If you just say hello, how are you? What's your name? How are you feeling today? That can make someone's day. It's simple acts of kindness and checking up on people is what's really going to make a difference.
Yeah, I know for a while my motto was a smile could save a life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It costs nothing and it's very easy to do, right? And eventually if you're having a bad day, enough smiles, there is a chemical response in your body to a smile. You'll start to feel a slight change. It's not a drastic 360 turn, but would you be okay if people didn't know where to turn, if they could reach out to you on Instagram or on a different social media platform?
Absolutely. My DMs are open.
Okay, and right now, because usernames are always subject to change, where could they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at OGNay1. OG does not mean original gangster. It is Olivia Gale. So let me clear
Oh,
that
that's awesome.
first. That's my full name. I promise you I'm not a gangster. I am the opposite. They could also reach out to me on Facebook, Liv Nay, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone that needs someone to talk to, and I'm open.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if we'll put those in the show notes as well, so everyone can find the OG in the comments.
Oh gosh.
But if you are struggling to find her platform, just reach out to us. Same thing, Facebook, not X anymore, just Instagram at Make Mental will direct you her way if you need some help. And again, if you request, we'll send you to trusted professionals that at least we believe in over here at Make Mental. I'm sure the OG Nay has her own set of trusted professionals. But are you ready for the final question on this episode of the Make Mental podcast, Liv?
Am.
All right. Cue the scary music, Liv. If there is one person in the entire world right now that you would like to give a hug to, who would it be and why?
My mom. She has been an anchor in my life. She has been there through all the ups and downs. She has raised me into the woman I could be today. I know I'll see her tomorrow because I work with her, and she works with Ward. And so I'll see her tomorrow. I'd like to give a hug to my mom because even on like when things are busy and like there's a lot of people around, I'm always like, Mommy, and I'll give her a hug. And when I'm leaving, it's a hug. And when we see each other and when we take our separate ways for the day, we always give each other a hug. And so I always love giving my mother a hug.
And I'm sure she could never get enough of them. So, Mom, there's another hug for you. And we appreciate you. Thank you for giving Liv some of your strength every single time she needs it. Thank you so much for being open and vulnerable and spending an hour of your day with us. I know the time flies. We appreciate you. We're proud of you. And we can't wait to see the light that you continue to project out into the world. Thank you so much
Thank
for joining us.
you. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.